Talking about Mars, the energy with this synastry is going to be very fast energy, very primal, very physical, a lot of activities, and also, just like the Mars Aries energy, battles. Let's begin with the positives. Mars will immediately seek the eighth houser to do activities because they feel that the eighth houser is the only person that understands their immediate need to do things. Usually Mars probably is very impulsive and wants to do things at top of the hat, and eighth houser is the only person that is willing to go on that high road because eighth houser here usually also carries that the same energy and fire inside of them too. The eighth houser can teach Mars how to take a step back sometimes because the eighth houser is a bit more patient due to their background circumstances. Therefore, they tend to be more slow compared to Mars in decisions in life, not towards each other. Keep that in mind. They can make money together, but it's usually done in a very fast-paced way, which is a good thing because usually things seem to fall in their lap, or because they're able to achieve the impossible things because a lot of people are scared to. So when they're together, they really tend to achieve a lot of things because they have that intensity of achieving things together and the same purpose. Both can help each other in terms of the intimacy part, understanding each other's wounds, because addressing it more head on because of the intensity of this synastry. A lot of them, if they have issues, all tends to kind of not disappear, but is more blunt. The energy is more in your face. So if they're trying to hide something in terms of the intimacy, if they're insecure about something, it tends to be ignored and just dealt by face. So they feel really comfortable in that department because they just feel like they're not going to be judged because the intensity is so fast paced that they just give or show to the other. Now let's get to the wishy-washy moments where it's good, but it can get messy. Mars loves the physical expression of the eighth houser, but sometimes it can be too much. Sometimes Mars can purposely do things to provoke the eighth houser because they love that passion that comes from the eighth houser. And it's also a way to confirm that the eighth houser still likes them or will still be around. So they do these things to see how much love the eighth houser actually feels for Mars. Mars will protect the eighth houser and vice versa. They tend to argue when they're together a lot and not agree with each other's morals, but in front of other people, they will have each other's back no matter what, even if they don't agree. There can be jealousy from both parts, but this is like a trigger, and usually it starts with the eighth houser. The eighth houser starts getting jealous, but it might even hold in. They are better at holding in that they're jealous compared to the Mars. Mars, all of a sudden, when eighth houser, because the way eighth houser reacts is by doing something that knows that the Mars will not like. So it does that to reverse the push and pull effect so that Mars then can be the one jealous instead of eighth houser being jealous. Both can energize each other, but it can be a good thing, but sometimes when they want to focus and settle down, they can really take each other up to each other's limits just because of feeling craving and constantly feeling that intensity. So even though it's good, it can then start to be bad because not all the time will not be violent because it's Mars. So it can get really hurtful. Even if it's verbal, it can get really hurtful because you really are pushing each other to its limits. Also, from what I've noticed is that Mars tends to take the V card of the eighth houser, and this is a good or bad thing because this is where you see scenarios where eighth house probably did not want it, and it tends to happen, or eighth houser might not be prepared and Mars forces it, or is that they're each other's first experience, and that's what the Mars does. It creates these like new explosion and adventures in a very like impulsive way, and usually it's Mars in the 8th house synastry. Now, let's get into the side comments or side thoughts of the synastry. Immediately when they see each other, they have recognition of each other, even if it means past life, but they usually tend to see each other's body a lot. They might not even be attracted to each other until they see each other in the physical flesh. And that's when they're like, oh, I find you really hot. And that's how it usually starts. And usually when this happens, nobody can pull them. Usually they get stuck. If you're in the synastry, you know what I'm talking about. You get really stuck with this person and you feel like you can't separate from them. And usually people in the room can notice that too. And that usually I notice that triggers people. This synastry triggers people. I guess it's because it's the Mars energy, but people don't really like when these two come together like this. And it's because you radiate this Mars energy, this powerful energy, and it can be too deep for people, especially if people are insecure or you're like in your camp or whatever. They don't really... Mars is usually the one that gives in when they meet though. Like Mars is the one that is more forward and decides to give up on this battle, because here, Mars is the one that calls the shots, but the 8th houser controls it. So let's say Mars says, I want to start dating you, right? 8th houser is going to be probably shook, right? Because of the energy and how fast it is. But 8th houser will then be the one saying when they're going to meet, what they're going to talk about, who needs to know about this relationship. Pretty much, like 8th house is the one that's going to decide the course of the relationship, but Mars is always the one that's going to be throwing things, and 8th house is always going to be the one controlling and catching it. Another actual physical example, since we're talking about Mars, is, for example, 8th house could be dancing, Mars could be dancing, and then Mars finally gets the courage, goes and gets the 8th houser, grabs the 8th houser, and just starts grinding, dancing on them and stuff. And the 8th houser eventually decides, I'm going to control this. Because the best way I can describe this is that once they are really close, there's something that happens here where they come down. Because usually when they're not together, they can get really like nervous and really like excited to see each other. But once they see each other, like they physically touch, it all comes down. Like both people come down and realize, see, it's not that bad. That's how they internally feel. They're like, this is not as bad as I thought it would be. So when they eventually probably start dancing, the 8th houser is the one that then decides what way they're going to dance, where the Mars is actually going to touch their body. There is a lot of touching, especially for Mars. Mars loves, and I mean loves, to touch the 8th houser, consistently touching. And it's always not in a sensual way like Venus. It's literally like always doing this, grabbing it like this, like always trying to touch the 8th houser and trying to control. And if the 8th houser rejects that, Mars gets really offended. Like Mars really gets offended. Now let's talk about the negatives. They can really hurt each other, but Mars will be the one holding the grudge for life. Okay, 8th house will move on and be okay. Because Mars has more of a tendency to hurt the 8th houser or to threaten the 8th houser of doing so. Now, because it's also physical, usually don't really tell the 8th houser. They do it through face expressions, body expression, maybe standing and blocking the 8th houser, closing the doors, slamming doors. That's how Mars translates to the 8th house. And they know it because it's a very intensive psychic synastry. This also can be like a one-night stand or a sneaky link that no one knows about. And usually because Mars is the one hiding it more. 8th house doesn't really care here. It's more the Mars that cares. The term digmatized comes from the synastry, where both people can't really leave each other because they feel like they're the only ones that really understand each other's body language. So these two also can make impulsive decisions in terms of contracts, signing contracts, investments. and there can be a lot of on and off here. They can get back together, not get back together. If you like readings like this, feel free to get a reading from my website.
That type of synastry that is continue if you dare. Go in at your own risk. You can see this person, you can notice them by immediate attraction. There's immediate connection with one another, but words won't be spoken. It's just straight energy. You peep each other from across the room and damn, they look good, but no one's gonna say anything. It's going to be very hush hush and secretive, but both of you guys feel most likely the same thing. And it's really hard to pinpoint are they feeling the same way? Am I being delusional? Or are they just keeping this, to themselves? And they are, because this is something that when you guys get in contact with one another, it's transformative for the both of you guys. So it's kind of proceed with caution, literally. Things could get twisted if things don't work out. It could fuck up your finances. You could go through some legal battles, or just abuse can happen here. Now you need to keep in mind for other overlays and aspects in the chart, not this one, astrology's energy, so just remember that. But the sex, the intimacy, off the charts. Now once that happens, once that goes down, it's kind of a wrap from there. You guys are hooked. You guys are possessive. Jealousy comes up here. And it happens because you guys let each other see those deep, dark sides of yourselves. Not everyone gets to see that part. So obviously you're not going to want to share that with just anyone, and you're not going to want someone that's seen that part of you go off and do that with someone else, This is where mind games happen. They come into play, and it can be really tricky to let go of, to get out of it, So it can kind of get uncomfortable when it gets that possessive like that, because at first it was just a lustful encounter, and now it's gotten really deep. But throughout this synastry, you guys are definitely going to be both transformed, whether that's for the good or the better. It's up to you guys. If you're mature enough to work through some conflicts that could come up with this, and really just say, I'm going to take the healing route, because 8th house does have healing energies as well. Or we could be destructive, it's up to you. Mars in the
8th house Mars synastry as a whole is just not for the weak. The 8th house is comfortable in the 8th house or the 4th house because it is co-ruled by Aries and Scorpio. But Mars is more of a violent planet, and the 8th house in general is a very deep, introspective planet, and it rules all things taboo, all things about the occult. Typically all things done in the dark. So in synastry, this person is kind of bringing out all those taboo parts of yourself that you may not typically want to show to the world, and you're almost fighting and resisting that. I will say, if you are typically an alchemist, or you're someone who's used to doing very deep introspective work on yourself, the synastry won't feel as heavy. But it is a very passionate type of synastry that you can embody with someone. It's typically something you will not find anywhere else, and that is why it comes across as somewhat addictive. If you natally have planets in your 8th house, you're used to working with this energy. And typically when you have synastry with someone in the 8th house, they are here to teach you a lesson. There can be somewhat of a power dynamic, and this kind of switches between who's the house person and who's the planet person. But yeah, not for the weak.
Composite Mars in the 8th house. You really don't know obsession until you've seen a couple with this placement. Anyways, welcome to my Composite Mars series. Composite Mars is the engine of the couple. This is how much power a couple has, their fuel reserves. This is their drive and their energy in order to fulfill their desires. And then, as we know, Mars has two personalities. Mars controls two signs, Aries and Scorpio. So that means Mars has a physical side, Aries, and Mars has an emotional side, Scorpio. And now we're in the emotional house. And so when we have Mars shifting all of its energy out of the physical side into the emotional side, we see a very intense relationship. Because Mars likes to function on both the physical side and the emotional side, what we see happening here is that there will be such deep intensity that will also become sexual intensity, that it will want to reach some kind of physical gratification all of the time. There is a huge emotional energy reserve here. And this is where the obsession comes from, because we want to spend all of our energy, all of our passion, all of our drive, everything we're willing to fight for in the psychology and in the intimacy, the emotional intimacy of the relationship. And if you've ever met an Aries, you will know that they love to chase. But if you've ever met a Scorpio, you will know that they love to mentally chase, meaning they're trying to always get information that is inaccessible or trying to sift up information that is unknown to most. And it's this fascination with the unknown and all this extra energy that is going into this psychological house that again leads into why this is such an obsessive placement for a couple, because as humans, we come with a lot of baggage, we come with a lot of secrets, and this is a couple that really wants to dig up those secrets with each other, which can be uncomfortable for a lot of people, and as well why a lot of people are not comfortable with composite 8th house and 12th house placements unless they have their own in their natal chart and they are familiar with that energy. What is beautiful about this placement is the 8th house is a really powerful house, okay? This is the mediation between realms. This is the in-between of life and death. This is the house of transformation, the house of shadow work, and the house of reconstruction. And so when we're thinking about revolution within a soul's journey, this is the house that it happens in. And so when we have composite Mars in the 8th house, this is a couple that is really here to resurrect each other from all of their traumas, from all of their sins, from all of their karma. This is a let's pay off the karmic debt together placement. What is the caveat to this is that because of the nature of this house being so intense, and especially depending on, you know, the rest of the composite chart and how it's playing out, is that when things are finally reconstructed and smooth, the planet here will want to maintain that intense ride. And so this is like looking for things to be wrong, or looking for more information to dig up, or looking for more intense reactions when now everything is actually balanced. And so this can cause boredom, irritation, or trying to poke things to get that intensity back. And so the key here is once the relationship has paid its karmic debt from the inside perspective, and you guys have reconstructed yourselves into the people that you want to be, now moving that externally. So either helping others or going into metaphysical occult practices, learning more about the world, learning more about unknown information in your environment rather than with each other. Honestly, this placement reminds
Imagine the place where you are the most vulnerable. All the things that you do not like about yourself. All the things that you are insecure about. Or your traumas and secrets. And then someone's Mars comes into that insecure space. And what is Mars? It's this kind of aggressive, assertive energy. So every time this person kind of express this kind of energy, like this aggressiveness, assertiveness, impatience, bossiness, it will trigger something very deep inside of you, some kind of deep wound. And it's not because the Mars person is bad. They may not even be aware that they have this effect on you. And you may get resentment towards that person. You may kind of push them away. So it can become this power struggle between those two people. Imagine the place where you are.
I made a video about 8th house synastry, and it was just like the quickest little thing ever. And it's always the videos that I just like mindlessly produce that I forget stuff, and then people are like asking me all these questions. So I'm going to make a true video on 8th house synastry. This applies to any personal planet. Okay, so I'll use mine for an example. The reason why I made that video was because I had been dating affected by this. This is a very symbiotic relationship. This person will not leave me alone. Will not leave me alone. Now, both people will be affected by this. This is a very symbiotic relationship, but the person with the planet landing in the 8th house is more likely to be the pursuer, and the person with the 8th house is more likely to be the one pursued. Now, because this person has their Mars in my 8th house, that's why I was mentioning like potential stalking and obsession, because Mars is action, Mars is sex drive, lust, all of those things. So it depends on what the planet is, what the placement is. It depends on a few different things. But it could also look like extreme emotional connection. It could look like, I've already mentioned obsession, stalking, somebody just not willing to let go. It could mean that this person feels seen by you in ways they've never been able to experience with another person. There could even be some potential like telepathic, subconscious undercurrent stuff going on. Like you guys just get each other in ways that other people have not. It could be very, very intense sexual attraction, really intense, like. But if you do have any questions, I'm happy to answer. So just
sometimes, honestly, the house person always had. I feel like sometimes, honestly, the house person always had the